I'm Houston City Council member Amanda Edwards. Welcome to the last installment of the Edwards Empowerment Talks. For the past 2 years, it's been my honor to inspire you with stories of some of the most compelling people in our community. Those stories have inspired me about their stories of perseverance, and I hope they've done the same for you. It's been our hope that with the Edwards Empowerment Talks that we were able to shed light on the fact that where you are today is not where you have to be tomorrow. It's really been a pleasure. Well, today, I would like to welcome to the studio one of my favorite leaders in the Houston community, which happens to be Mr. Felix Fraga. Mr. Fraga was born in Houston in 1929 and raised in Houston's East End. At a young age, he began working in the Rusk Settlement House, where his bosses supported his education. He went on to attend the University of Houston on a baseball scholarship, and his work in the Rusk Settlement House and the growth of the Mexican-American population led to his work at Ripley House until he stepped down in 1990. During his tenure as director, he instituted several programs to help the community. Mr. Fraga served in the Houston Independent School District from 1990 to 1994 and in Houston City Council from 1994 to 1999. Currently, he serves as Vice President of External Relations for Baker Ripley. Join me in welcoming our guest today, Mr. Felix Fraga. Felix, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's an honor.
It's been such a pleasure to be a part of the Houston community, and there's not much in this Houston community that you haven't some way touched or inspired, and I just want to hear a little bit more about your story. And as I was mentioning to you offline, one of the reasons I'm so excited today, not only is today our last installment of the Edwards Empowerment Talks, but I could not think of someone who was as aspiring as you. I mean, you are someone who has really been a trailblazer by example, by your quiet presence, but also by the deeds and the impact you've had on the community. So thank you so much for the work that you've done.
It was all my honor and my pleasure.
Yeah.
That's the best thing I think could ever happen to me, to be hired to do this kind of work.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk about the work, a little bit about the work. So tell us a little bit about your background. You grew up in Houston, yes. And what were people doing back then in terms of getting their education? Because I know that you ended up going and getting your college education. So what was going on in the household, and who pushed you to get there?
Well, in the community there was the Ripley Community Center was the first one that ever was started in Houston, mm-hmm. And they had a early school for kids before they went to the regular school.
Okay.
In fact,
so like a Head Start type of thing?
Right. In fact, I was 3 years old when I started the school there.
Child prodigy.
It was a community center called Rusk Settlement because it was on the Rusk School grounds.
Okay.
And Rusk School was, I think, the third school to be built in Houston.
Okay.
And in 1936, when I was about 6, and in the first grade, I went to Rusk School.
Okay.
In fact, but before that, I went to the Rusk Community Center, okay, which is now Ripley House. And when I was 3 years old, I believe.
Now, how long were you there, and when did you leave Rusk Settlement School?
When I became 6 years old and was able to go to the first grade at Rusk School.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. And so, tell me what was the foundation that was established in terms of the value of education?
Well, I couldn't have done anything better than to get an education and get a chance to help other kids do the same thing, and even adults, because we used to have classes for adults that spoke only Spanish, mm-hmm. to learn English, and it was a good program. And I started working there first as a volunteer in the playground and that things. And when I was 14, they said that if you want to stay working here with us, we're going to have to hire you. Do you want to work here? I said, yeah. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
So at 14, I started working at the center, and it was the only place I've ever worked. I didn't work any place else but there.
Yeah. And so tell me this in terms of just some of the folks in the community, for those that might not be familiar with the East End, there were a lot of Spanish speakers and folks that didn't have access to certain entry points with education and other things. So what did you feel your role was in terms of bridging that gap and making those connections for people?
It was just to try to help people take advantage of the efforts that the community center was providing for them, education, work.
And you knew that early on, 14 you said?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
And I worked there for the rest of my work life.
Okay, very good. Well, hold that thought. We'll be right back. And when we come back, I want to hear more about the work life and the work and impact that you've had on the community. We'll be right back. And we're back talking to the one and only Mr. Felix Fraga. We're learning more about the impact that he's had on the community, but first learning a little bit about his journey. And so thank you again, Mr. Fraga, for being here. You were sharing with me offline, and I want to bring that to the forefront. You had sisters and brothers growing up, and were you the first, because you went to school, of course you were with Russ Settlement, but after that, you went to college. Tell me a little bit more about how you had the courage to kind of venture off and go to school, and it was on a baseball scholarship, right?
Yes. It was at the University of Houston.
Okay.
And I had a lady from the community, I forget what her civic club work did, but when I told the people at Ripley House where I worked that I wouldn't mind going to college, and they quickly called her up and see if she could find a scholarship for me.
So how did you know why was that your goal? What did you want to do with college education? What did you think that would lead to?
Well, it just would let me continue the work that I was doing and make a better contribution than if I didn't have the education. So,
were your parents telling you that, or you just kind of asked people around you?
More they asked people around. My parents had a hard time just feeding us.
Yeah, because there were 5 of you?
6.
6, okay.
So they didn't have time to try to convince us of anything that might be helpful to us. I mean, going to school or what have you. So
you had to be the role model for your brothers and sisters.
Right, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. And so baseball, I hear somebody told me that you play a little baseball. So
no, I did.
You still play?
No. No.
No?
Gosh. And a little football too. In the neighborhood, not with any professional or a school team or anything else.
Okay, so you used that and got yourself a scholarship. When you got to University of Houston, what did people tell you?
No, I didn't get a scholarship by the sport.
Okay.
I played also baseball in high school.
So you played baseball in high school.
I mean, I was in one of the classes where they had baseball for the first time in high school.
Okay.
They had basketball and football before that, but never baseball until I think I was 14 or 15 when I was old enough to play baseball on the high school team.
Okay, very good. And then tell me what college, when you first stepped foot, were you intimidated? Were you ready? Tell me how you felt about that adventure.
No, it wasn't too bad.
Okay.
I don't remember ever feeling maybe I shouldn't be here or anything like that. I was just lucky enough to continue to have the time to study and things like that.
Did anybody ever tell you shouldn't be there, or did they try to make you feel that way?
Not
or you
too
didn't
much.
Have that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was the first Mexican American to play baseball at the University of Houston.
Okay.
And I was able to get on the team, on the varsity team my first year. As normally, when you first enter the school, you have to be on the second team or the B team, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
But I played on the first starting team since I was a freshman.
Okay.
So for 4 years, I was able to make the first team.
Okay.
And
Excellent. So then tell me, after college, your work in your career, you wanted to continue the work that you were doing at Baker Ripley. You wanted to help people.
Right.
So tell me what exactly you did once you started in your career.
well, you know, I started working for Baker Ripley
14.
when I was 14, and I forget what grade I was in, but they kept on me until I finished high school, and then they said, if you want to go to college, we can try to help you get a scholarship. I said, well, yeah, I didn't have any other plans. My two oldest brothers didn't go to college. They both had to go to the Second World War.
Wow.
I was only, I think, 14 when the war started, so
You were too young.
it was too young.
Yeah.
My 16-year-old brother, my oldest brother was 16 at this time. Let's see, one was 16 and one was 18. The one 18 was able to join the Army by telling him his right age, but the one that was 16 had to tell him that he was already 18,
Yeah.
so he could go to also to the service.
Yeah.
And
that was often considered a way out, right?
yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
You're right. And I was 14 only, so I was too young to go to the war. And some people tell me, well, did you go later? I said, no, by the time I got 18, the war was over.
Yeah, so you missed it.
Yes, I missed
We
the
won't
war.
say you didn't dodge it, but you missed it.
Right, yeah.
That's right. So
Yeah.
then when you started doing your work at Baker Ripley, who did you want to impact most?
I don't know if I thought of it that way. I thought about it the way that they were helping me try to help others. So,
Yeah.
So
Anybody.
anybody that needed help, I was more than happy to help them. And it was sad for me when sometimes I was not able to do as much as they needed or wanted or should have. But I kept on and worked at it and enjoyed it. In fact, one people that I used to go to their program on the radio to be interviewed and tell a little about what, like we're doing today. And the announcer would always tell me, "Here comes a gentleman with the eternal smile," because I used to be able to smile easily.
Yeah.
And didn't have any trouble doing that.
I think you have an easy time smiling still. So we'll hold that smile and we'll be right back. We're going to cover a little bit more about your 70-year journey at Baker Ripley. So hold that thought. We'll be right back. And we're back with the one and only Mr. Felix Fraga. Felix, we were having a good time talking a little bit about your career and longevity at Baker Ripley. Can you share with us just a little bit about just a few examples of some of the programs you started while there?
Well, education was the thing we all felt was needed by people that live in neighborhoods like where Ripley House was there. You know, people that have a hard time having enough income to do things that they really need to do. So one of the things that I was real happy about was that we were able to start a school at Ripley House by somebody else, but we provided the space for it so that kids could come and stay in school long enough to even in some cases go to college. So, but there was a program. I mean, somebody somehow got the notion that Mexicans shouldn't have to go to school, or no. Let's see what they tell us. No, they wanted us to say that Mexicans and whites and can go to school together, but not the blacks. And that didn't seem very well. So the Mexican people said, no, we don't want to be called white, only to keep the blacks out of the school. So we said, if we're not going to go to your schools if you're going to insist that we call ourselves white, you know. And so they started back getting out of the white schools and started our own schools. And we started the first one at Ripley House there, so that the Mexican kids could come there and not be told that they were white. So that the blacks, the blacks. So we did that, and for about a year, and then finally the schools decided that they would let everybody come in, blacks, Mexicans, and whites, anybody.
Excellent.
So that the fact that we were able to help in that well, it was one of the things that we felt the proudest of, and it was a great feeling to see the kids be accepted in any school that they wanted to go, no matter the color.
Yes. See, I told you were a pioneer. So let me ask this. So what about some of the challenges? I mean, you've had a 70-year career at Baker Ripley. I know that there have been some things that were challenging. What made you keep you motivated to keep going, keep pushing?
Well, this was one of them. I mean, we had to find some way that we can have schools at our centers and have teachers and all of that. So of all the things we got involved with, this was one of the ones that I thought it was the most important, but also the most most difficult one. Yeah.
And you didn't know how long it was going to be going on.
That's right. I mean,
so we know it after the fact, like how long that took and all of those things. But when you're in the middle of those moments, you don't know how long that's going to be something you endure.
And then the first job I had as a kid, while I was still going to school, was selling newspapers. Which you don't see that much anymore.
No.
Kids in the streets. But at that time, we had a good group of our students that would go after school to go sell newspapers out in the streets, and even shine shoes. We used to have the spots to shine people's shoes.
Yeah. Well, a lot of time has moved by. Somebody told me, I think that you celebrated your 90th birthday recently?
Yes.
No, I don't believe you. I know no one believes you when you say that.
Thank you. The day before Halloween, I became 90.
Yeah. So how does that feel? And what words of wisdom do you want to share with everybody else?
Gosh, just try as hard as you can, and don't give up unless you just have to. But just try as hard as you can, and eventually things work out.
Yeah, and just keep at it. Yeah. Now let me ask this question of you, because I also know that over time, Baker Ripley wasn't the only thing that was ever an opportunity for you, and that was something that was in your heart. Can you talk a little bit about when you know that what your service is supposed to be, and your service or your journey or your mission, when you know that's the path that you take versus maybe going to some of the other job offers you might have had over time in different places across the country?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't too many job offers as much as it was the fact that they wanted me to play baseball in a professional team.
Felix, you didn't tell us that in the beginning of the interview. So you were offered to play professional baseball?
Well, they said, come and try out, and we think you can make it. And I said, no, I better stay with my job and get that done first. And so I never, after I finished the 4 years at playing baseball at college, I just continued to work full time then. Not even the baseball got in my way.
So how did you know that this was what you were supposed to be doing?
You feel good when you can help kids or people. And in these kind of ways. In fact, some of the other workers used to get angry at me because I'd never asked for a vacation or anything, and then whenever they wanted to see about getting their vacation, they said, "Well, Felix hasn't gone yet." They would
You
come
were
back
that
to
person.
They would come back to me and say, when are you going to get away so we can go?"
Get on with it, Felix. Take your
But,
vacation.
No, I never worked anywhere else once I started there.
Yeah.
I guess maybe 60 years or more I've working there at the center, and I was never, thinking that I was working too hard and not getting paid too much. That never entered my mind.
Yeah.
And vacation, I would wait until they tell me you can take off now, and the other guys would say, well, hurry up and take your vacation so we can go too. No, it was, I can't think of anything happier than all the work I did there that if I hadn't done it, I don't know what kind of life I would have had.
Yeah.
But the fact I worked there and as long as I did, I have never been happier than when I was there.
Yeah. Well, we couldn't be prouder of you and the example that you've been as a servant leader. And like I said, not the loudest person in the room, but your work has been so solid and has been so impactful for so many people. And I learned, even just in terms of sitting here with you today, more of the impact that you've had on the broader community. So I can't thank you enough for being such an inspiration, being such a joyful servant leader, and then of course inspiring so many other people. You realize you do inspire people, don't you?
Well, if I did, I'm
Well,
glad.
I think one of your sons is, working in that, following in your footsteps.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, both. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But
No, it's been the best life I could ever want to have.
yeah. Well, I can't thank you enough for being my last interview. And certainly you are, I guess, you asked me the question, whether you're going to be my oldest person interviewed, and I guess the answer is yes, but certainly one of my liveliest as well. So I've enjoyed seeing you work and just seeing you influence the community. So I want to thank you for being a part of our last installment of the Edwards Empowerment Talks today. And I want to just ask if there's anything you want to share, one last bit of advice for those that are watching.
Gosh, don't give up more than anything else, and then youngsters, if they can try to get the best education possible.
Yes.
They can get anything else done in their lives if they have the good education.
So education first, and then don't give up.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Fraga. And this wraps up our last interview of the Edwards Empowerment Talks. As always, I hope this interview truly inspired and empowered you to take hold of the life you were destined to live so that you can be the solution for your life, your family, and your community. You can leave a legacy of change just like our guest has today, Mr. Felix Fraga. And a special thank you to Mr. Fraga for joining us. And thank you for watching us for the Edwards Empowerment Talks.